okay? We're halfway through the halfway week of the semester. Since I have nothing to return to you officially today, I think we'll get started as usual with the assignment that you have for me for today. That would be workbook pages 9 and 10. Technically, I had you just work on, for the last assignment, sections D and E on page 10 of the workbook. But I would be open to asking any of you if you had questions still on page 9 before I collect and grade both pages 9 and 10. So, yeah. So, we got a few minutes. If you have any questions, let me know. I know we did some already from, I think it was section C on page 9. We did some of those already last class, but if you still have additional questions about anything that I had assigned, I'll take those now. Yes?
Could you walk through number 31 on legacy section?
Okay. So number 31. Let's go over here, since I have a little space. Number 31 is in the bass clef, and we're given a C. And we're asked to spell or find the note that is a minor sixth below. A minor sixth below. Because the minor sixth is kind of a somewhat large interval, I guess I should say. Generally, I think if you deal with fifths and sixths and sevenths and octaves, those are pretty large, whereas the fourth and smaller are definitely less large intervals. So what I would probably do, because the 6 is kind of a large interval, is I would invoke, or I would use the inverting principle on this one. And I would find out what note is a major third above C. That's probably what I would do for this one. Because I know that the inversion is a major third above, then I can calculate and know that the note E, just plain E, is a major third above C, because E is the third scale degree of C major. So then, remember, the answer is supposed to be, all your answers are supposed to be below the given note. So all you do, what you should do then is you just lower it or drop that note that you found an octave. And it turns out that this E, with one ledger line below the staff in bass clef, that should be then a major sixth, a minor sixth below. And that would be my final answer for that. Yes, sir.
21 and 22 in D.
Okay. 21 and 22 in section D. There we are using the treble clef. And 21, the interval is between this F in measure 21 is supposed to be, it is F sharp. It just doesn't have the sharp because the previous note had it. But it is F sharp. And that would be the interval from the F sharp up to the C natural. Yeah. And then the interval after that is going, or the note after that is going to be a G sharp. So we need to find what the melodic intervals are here from F sharp up to C, and then the interval from C down to G sharp. If I count lines and spaces here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. F sharp up to C is some sort of fifth. I would probably think of what do I know is a perfect fifth above an F sharp. And a perfect fifth would be scale degree 5 in the key of F sharp. So a perfect fifth above F sharp must be then a C sharp. Because this is C natural, I'm actually, the space between the F, or above the F sharp is actually a half step smaller than that of a perfect fifth. So when you shrink the distance of a perfect fifth by a half step, it immediately becomes diminished. So I would say that interval is a diminished fifth. G sharp up to C or C down to G sharp, however you'd like to think about it. I know that if I were to write the interval as a harmonic interval such as this, I can see that that is some sort of fourth. But I also know that if I took the accidental away from the G and just had plain G up to C, that would be a perfect fourth. Because C is the fourth scale degree in G major. But if I apply the accidental back to the G, what was a perfect fourth has now been decreased by a half step. So because I've raised the bottom note just a half step. So again, a perfect interval that is shrunk by a half step automatically becomes diminished. So this interval here I have is a diminished fourth. So two diminished intervals in a row. Yes. Good. Other questions? On page 9 or 10. For section E, did you mark or check just one of those 3 lines for each interval? All right. Well, I won't delay us too long. If there are no further questions, then again, make sure your name is somewhere on the top of either page 9 or 10, and I'll pick this up. And I'll do my best to get it graded and back to you by Friday, but I can't make any promises. Somebody's allergic to interval stuff. So today we are finally sort of crossing a threshold where we're moving away from intervals onto 3-note harmonic structures called triads. And obviously triads are super important because the basis, the foundation of all harmony in tonal music is the triad. That unit itself, that 3-note chord. So let's start talking about the triad, and I don't need to get too far in the discussion of triads, although we can go through lots of examples to get you some experience, because I think I'm spending the next several classes still on triads. So Friday and also next Monday, we'll still be dealing with triads, even though we'll be talking about some additional or new information, additional to what I'm going to tell you today. But you know, every musician, every student of music has to go through the process of learning about these fundamentals that we've been dealing with. In this unit specifically, intervals, and now triads, and then after triads we'll deal with 7th chords. I had to go through this process at one point. Even the best composers and the greatest minds, music minds that we have in our country, they had to go through this and learn this at one point too. So maybe perhaps you can think of it as a slightly special time for you in a way. Anyways, in music, A harmony. The word harmony is the sound that results when two or more notes are being performed simultaneously. When two or more pitches are performed simultaneously, that's what we're talking about, harmony or the harmonic aspect of music. Okay, so as long as you have two or more, you've got some harmony going in terms of music. Harmony, I may have mentioned in a prior class, is the vertical dimension of music. Kind of like intervals, we were dealing mostly with harmonic intervals, and that is a vertical dimension. Tonal music, the style of music that we're studying is called tonal music. Tonal music makes use of what we call tertian chords. Okay, so here's another fancy word. Spelled T-E-R-T-I-A-N. Tertian chords, and the prefix TER in this case refers to the number 3, or the prefix refers to the intervals of thirds, most specifically for our purposes. That is, we build and we construct chords by stacking notes in intervals of thirds. That's the magic interval that we just stack notes on top of each other as many times as we need to in intervals of thirds in order to get a chord. Now, the most basic tertian chord in music is the one with 3 notes, and that is called a triad. So we kind of have threes going wild here. Not only do we have harmonic structures that are going to contain 3 notes stacked on top of one another, but those notes are going to be stacked precisely in intervals of thirds as we build our way from the bottom up. Okay, so lots of threes going on here. Now, you may be happy to know that the types of thirds used for building triads are major and minor thirds only. So we're going to be stacking major thirds, and we're going to be using minor thirds, stacking both of those types. That is somewhat good news because that means you don't have to worry about or be concerned about intervals of augmented thirds, nor do you have to be concerned about diminished third intervals. Despite all the variety that we have in tonal music with all types of chords, triads, seventh chords, etc., etc., the only way the chords are built is they're built by stacking major thirds and minor thirds, believe it or not. We don't stack augmented thirds or diminished thirds on top of one another to get chords in this style of music. We just don't. It seems like, boy, that would be, you would curtail and you would really limit or stunt the amount of variety we have in music. But just by stacking different combinations of major thirds and minor thirds, we can get a whole array, a whole slew of chords, triads and seventh chords. Not to mention extended chords like ninths, 11ths, and 13ths, but we don't talk about those until your last semester of theory. All right, so major and minor thirds are the most important here. There are 4 possible ways to combine or to stack major and minor thirds to produce a triad. And I'm going to list those 4 ways over here to give you there's only 4 types of chords, or four types of, triads that we can get using different combinations of major and minor third stacking. So 4 possible ways to combine these. One of the ways is to start with a major third, and on top of that major third to stack a note, another major third. And by the way, let's see. Let me just, as an aside over here, when we talk about stacking thirds, for instance, that's a third right there, C to E, and this is a third also right here, E to G. And when I talk about stacking thirds, basically what we're going to do is we're going to fuse these together. We're going to place this, superimpose this third, the E to G, on top of this third, the C to E, so that altogether we're just going to get C, E, and G. And and this is gonna mesh in and blend in with the middle note. So, by the way, superimpose means to stack things or set things over or on top of one another. That's the process we're doing here. So it's kind of like you can picture this third and this third, and we're just gonna fuse them together, bring them in sync, and then what we get as the final result is that. That's kind of how we're working with the thirds and stacking them on top of one another. Okay, so I was saying there are 4 possible ways to combine major and minor thirds to produce a triad. One of the ways is to stack 2 major thirds on top of one another. So let's do that. Since I don't have a lot of space here, let me start with a G on the bottom. What note is a major third above G? Well, we should know that that pitch is B. And then finally, what note is a major third above a B? And the answer is a D sharp. So you see how this minor third here is a major, this bottom interval here, this third is a major third, and so is the top interval. Both are major thirds. And so what we get is this construction of this triad that's spelled G, B, D sharp. G, B, D sharp. And when you stack 2 major thirds on top of one another, the resultant triad that you get is known as an augmented triad. An augmented triad. I don't really need this. What's another way to combine or stack major and minor thirds? Well, start with a major third on the bottom, but on top of that, place a minor third. And if I start with the same pitch, G, a major third above G is still B. But this time now, a minor third above my middle note B is going to be D natural. And the type of triad that results when you stack a minor third on top of a major third is called a major triad. Yet another combination is to start, the bottom interval is a minor third, and above that interval place a note that is a major third. If I do that from the same starting pitch G, looks like a minor third for my bottom interval, that is going to give me a B flat. G to B flat is a minor third. But then a major third above B flat gives me D natural, or D again. Stacking the notes in this particular combination of intervals results in what's called a minor triad. And what's the only other combination of stacking major and minor thirds possible that I didn't do yet?
Minor third and minor third.
That's right, 2 minor thirds. So let's do that. If I start on G, the first note above there, a minor third above G, is B flat. But a minor third above B flat is D flat. And a triad formed by stacking 2 minor thirds on top of one another yields what we call a diminished triad. Diminished triad. Okay. So it turns out that in our system of Western tonal music that we study here, it turns out there are only 4 different kinds of triads. And these are the 4. Augmented, major, minor, diminished. There are no other 3-note chords possible. There are no other 3-note chords in the new style of music we're studying. It's just these 4, the triads. Okay, now, let's go just a little bit further with these. Now, I built these by stacking thirds, and rightly so. I mean, that's the way, the book constructs it. That's the way I think it's most understandable. But we can also figure out or discover another thing about these four types of triads. And that is, what is the interval between the lowest note and the highest note of all four of these? So for instance, in the augmented triad, what kind of, oh, by the way, I should say that when we stack two-thirds on top of one another, the resultant total interval from the bottom to the highest note is a fifth. This goes back to that fuzzy math that we talked about last class. A third plus a third in music actually equals a fifth, not a sixth. It's one less than you expect. Because we don't count the line on which the middle note lies occupied, we don't count that twice when we count lines and spaces or pitch leveling. So a third plus a third equals a fifth. So all of these four triads are going to span a fifth from the bottom note to the lowest note to their highest note. In the augmented triad, what type of fifth is G up to D sharp? Does anybody know?
That's major, or I'm sorry, perfect.
Not quite.
Okay.
Not quite. G up to D sharp is a little bit bigger than a perfect.
Augmented?
Yeah, it's an augmented fifth. Perhaps that's where we get the name for the triad, an augmented triad. Although that doesn't apply to all the rest of these. Let's look at the next type of triad here, a major triad. What kind of fifth do we have between the lowest and the highest note? This time G to D.
Is that one perfect fifth?
That is a perfect fifth, that's right. In the minor triad, we have the same type of fifth interval between the outer notes. G to D is still the same pitches, so that's a perfect fifth also. But what type of fifth do we have between the lowest and the highest notes, or the outer notes of a diminished triad?
A diminished fifth.
A diminished fifth, that's right. So not only can we think of these triads as having these characteristics of these particular features stacked thirds in this order, in this combination, but we can also discover, we also learn that the four types of triads have these various types of fifth intervals between their lowest and their highest notes also. Yes?
Can you play the fourth one on the piano?
You bet. I was just going to do that. You are reading my mind. Okay, so the first type of triad I have up there, augmented. Sounds like that. The major one, a minor triad. And finally, the diminished triad. We don't really need to go into consonant versus dissonant chords here, but I'll tell you, out of those four triad types, two of them are considered dissonant. Which ones do you think they are?
The augmented and diminished.
Right, the augmented and diminished. Whereas the major and minor triads are considered to be consonant triads. And it's all because of the type of fifth interval we get from the outer notes, the lowest note to the highest note, that gives us the dissonant versus the consonant sound. Perfect fifths, of course, are consonant intervals. Augmented and diminished fifths are dissonant intervals. Okay. Now, in the style of music we're studying, guess which two types of triads are encountered most often? Which ones do you think composers use most often and you hear most often?
Major and minor.
That's right, the major and minor triads are seen much more frequently than the other types. But one of these four is hardly ever used, hardly ever heard, and hardly ever seen in this style of music. Which one of those four types is the rarest?
Augmented?
Yeah, it's the augmented triad. Major and minor triads encountered most often, but the augmented triad is encountered the least often. Diminished triads are they're encountered, just not as frequently as major and minor ones, but they're encountered enough. Diminished triads do crop up and pop up somewhat frequently. Okay. Now, there are also names, besides the names of the entire triad, like augmented, major, minor, and diminished, there are also names beside the note names for the members of a triad. So, for instance, with this diminished triad here, yes, I know that its parts are G, B flat, and D flat. Those are its, we say that those are its members or constituent members. But there are also other names for the three members of a triad. The lowest note of the triad when it is stacked in thirds like this is called, does anyone know what it's called? Some of you may know. Think of a plant or vegetation.
The root.
That's right, it's called the root. We say that that's the lowest note is the root of the triad, or the root of the chord. The middle note of the triad is referred to as the third. Nothing too spectacular or surprising there. And then finally, the highest note of the triad, when it's stacked in this order, is called the fifth of the chord. So we have three parts, or three members to any triad. The bottom note is the root, the middle note is the third, and the highest note, or the top note, is referred to as the fifth. Root, third, and fifth. You know, I'll go ahead and turn this on. I was debating on whether or not to do this, but I can see the value and how that it can be to show something up on these TV screens. On pages 38 and 39 is where you got all of this information that I've been talking about for the past several minutes. In fact, in the middle and bottom of page 38, I think the author has some pretty neat diagrams. They sure look a lot more professional and straight than mine. So here's your four types of triads. The leftmost one there is your augmented triad. Then just the next one to the right is your major triad, the minor triad, and then finally the rightmost one is the diminished triad. You can see all of the types of thirds, how they're stacked in that particular order, just like I did on the board here. And you can see the sizes of the fifths intervals that are spanned between the lowest note and the highest note. So even though that's not on a staff and you don't have any note heads or music pitches like that, it still is to me, it's a pretty good graphical way to represent what we're talking about here. And you can always refer to that in your book, page 38, if you forget. Or if you took it down in your notes here, you can always refer to that. In fact, let's see, the author uses G as the root. How do I do this? And there they all are, just like I have up on the screen. It's the bottom of page 38. Oh yeah, by the way, do you see the abbreviations for the four types of triads? Those are the abbreviations I will try also to use and stay consistent with the author. An augmented triad can be represented by a plus sign. Major triad, capital, and minor triad, lowercase m, and a diminished triad with the little circle or degree symbol again. Those are the abbreviations for the four qualities or types of triad. And then finally, up on the top of page 39, these are again, the three parts to any triad. The bottom note is the root, the middle note is the third, and the top note is the fifth. We say that those are the three members of a triad. It's not like they belong to an exclusive club or anything, but you could think of it that way. For instance, if there was such a country club or a nice hoity-toity club called the G Major Club, the only members of that club would be G, B, and D. That's right. So, however you want to think of whatever works best in your mind. Okay. Now, one thing I have not mentioned yet, and one thing that the book neglects to mention early on here, which I dislike, is how do you name? I mean, besides, okay, yeah, we know that the triads are called augmented, major, minor, and diminished, but sometimes triads are referred to by other names. In fact, a triad is always named by the pitch of its root. So So for instance, all of these triads here on the top staff, they are all G triads. You could say that they're all G chords, because all of their roots, their lowest notes, are all G. But to be even more specific, we could say that this is a G augmented triad, this one is a G major triad, a G minor triad, and a G diminished triad. But it's always the root, the lowest note, that gives, when they're stacked in thirds like this, that gives the triad its name. So when musicians talk about chords in conversation, whether you're playing piano, guitar, or whatever, a musician might say, no, I'm talking about the G diminished chord in bar 17. And that's exactly what he or she would be referring to. Right? You probably heard, maybe you've heard that in passing. As you go through your musical career here at school, before you graduate, you might find yourself telling a classmate or a peer of yours, no, could you play me the G minor chord that's in the left hand of measure whatever, and they know exactly what you're talking about. So, I think that's the majority or the bulk of the information we need to know about triads. Let's go ahead and apply this information to start analyzing some and to start spelling them correctly. Because we need to get our brains used to thinking about stacking major and minor thirds in such a fashion, and also about checking the intervals of the outside notes, whether or not they should be perfect fifths, augmented fifths, or diminished fifths. Okay, so let's start with, I can draw your attention to this measure over here. And basically what I just want you to do is help me identify the type of triad. In other words, is it major, minor, augmented, or diminished? And all I need to do in the blank is to just put the abbreviation for that triad type in there. So the first one is B flat D F. Yes?
Major.
It is. It's a major triad. Now, when you're first starting out doing these, if you have access or recourse to a keyboard or piano, I mean, you can certainly go to the piano and play B flat D F, and perhaps your ear will tell you, hey, that's a major triad. But in this class, especially when it comes to quizzes and tests, you're not going to be able to play all these chords that you see on the staff. And so we have to be able to analyze and know that B flat to D is a major third, and D to F is a minor third. That fits this recipe here, which makes it a major triad. You see how I did that? You can also check your work too by checking the outer interval. B flat up to F natural happens to be a perfect fifth. That also fits with a major triad. And maybe perhaps now you start to see in hindsight how important it is to be able to know and calculate intervals. Because if you don't understand intervals, you can't spell them or identify them, then how on earth can you be expected to understand how to recognize and analyze triads, which are full of intervals? Okay, I digress. I shouldn't preach so much. Let's go to the next one here. The next triad is E, G, B flat. Do you know what type it is?
Diminished.
It is. It's diminished. That's right. And do you look at the individual thirds to double check that, or do you
Yeah.
just check the
That's
outer?
what I did. I
Yeah.
did the individual.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Exactly. You can recognize that E to G is a minor third, and G to B flat is another minor third. So that makes it one of these types of triads. And E up to B flat checks out too. That is a diminished fifth interval. After you see these, for weeks and weeks and months and months and over again, the idea is you shouldn't have to go in and calculate what types of thirds are stacked. You'll just see that particular combination of three notes, and you'll just know instantly, like you know your own name. You'll know that's an F minor triad, or that happens to be G sharp diminished, that kind of thing. But it just takes repetition, it takes practice over and over and over again. And by the way, again, I should put a plug in for this. If any of you are taking class in piano, or any of you have played piano, playing these different types, the four types of triads, on different roots on the keyboard is such an immense learning aid to your learning and understanding. Because there are, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but there are like major triads that are white key, black key, white key. And then there are major triads that are all white keys. There are major triads that are all black keys. There are minor triads that are white, black, white, or the reverse, black, white, black. All these different things, the feel, the visual, the color of the black and white keys, combined with what you know about this from theory, all of that can really help you to start understanding, recognizing, and just kind of becoming one with all these triads. Really getting them under your belt and start living and breathing these. Because that's what musicians do, eventually, right? If you're a professional musician or you're a music educator, this is kind of the bread and butter of what you eat and breathe. Thankfully, triads do not have many calories. You can eat as many as you want. All right, anyways, I got digressed again. How about the next one here? D sharp, F sharp, A sharp.
Augmented?
That's right, it's an augmented triad, so all you gotta do is put a plus in the blank, you got it. This is a major third, D sharp to F sharp, and F sharp to A sharp is also another major third. And finally, the last one, C, E flat, G. Any takers?
Minor?
That's right, it's a minor triad, you bet. A minor third here on the bottom, and E flat to G is a major third, so that follows this recipe right there. Okay, so one of the things we want you to do between now and Friday is get practice on just identifying triad types, whether they're major, minor, augmented, or diminished. Another task that we want you to be able to get good practice on is the next one, and that is, can you spell or build or construct the indicated triad above the given note? And the given note in this case is the root. It is the lowest or the bottom note. So let's try a little bit of that. Spell the indicated triad given the root and type. All right, so we need a diminished triad above built on an A sharp. Diminished means we're going to stack two minor thirds on top of one another. A minor third above A sharp gives me C sharp. I know that. And then another minor third above C sharp should be the pitch just plain E natural. So A sharp, C sharp, E turns out to be a diminished triad because it's got the right types of thirds. They're both minor thirds and they're stacked on top of one another. You see how I get that? Okay. Let's try a few others. Oh man, this one is already on the board somewhere. Does anyone want to spell a minor triad? Bless you. Go ahead.
It's B flat, then D.
That's right. A minor third above G is B flat, and then a major third above B flat is D. And that's just like what we have here, right? B flat, D. Has the same root. Okay, an augmented triad on F. Go ahead.
A and C sharp?
That's right, F, A, C sharp. And again, you check those thirds, those intervals there, and you'll find that it is two major thirds stacked on top of one another, and the outer interval between the bottom and the highest note is indeed an augmented fifth. And then lastly, let's do a major triad on D flat.
F natural, A flat.
That's right, F natural and A flat. Boom, you got it. And if you go play those notes on the piano, you'll get the nice major sound that you expect from that triad. Okay, good. Let's try, we only need to do, maybe one or two of these. Just in case you're ever asked to do them this way, we're in trouble, but let's try, what if you're asked to spell this chord? E flat minor. E flat minor triad. You should know because of the, well, you tell me, what is the root of this chord going to be?
E flat?
That's right, because it's named an E flat minor triad. So the root is E flat. So we know that. And then what would the other two notes above that be to make it a minor triad? What's a minor third above E flat, for instance?
It's a G flat.
G flat. Good. Now, what is a major third above a G flat? Yeah. Look at that. That triad is all black keys on the piano. G flat, G flat, G flat. Yeah, I think you guys get the idea of how to do that. What I'd like to do is I'd like to just do like an example of each type of problem that's in your textbook, because your assignment, which is going to be out of the workbook, has the exact same types of problems that are in your self-test in your textbook on page 39. So let's see, let's go to section A on the bottom of page 39. And this one we'll just do one or two of these. We can do this one verbally. I don't even have to write it in there. Let me read the instructions to you since you can't see all those. It says spell the triad given the root and type. Major triads are indicated by an uppercase letter, minor by an uppercase letter, followed by the lowercase m, augmented with an uppercase letter followed by a plus sign, and diminished an uppercase letter followed by a circle. So are you if you can translate or understand the author's symbolism here, the first is asking for the notes of a B flat minor triad. The next one is E major, just a capital letter. The next one, G diminished. And number 9, for instance, number 11, I should say, is D augmented. Just as long so you know what they mean, what kind of triads they're asking for there. So let's just do number 1. Start with the bottom note, the root. And can you give me the 3 notes in order from bottom up for a B flat minor triad? Well, I'll get you started. I know the first note is B flat. Yeah.
G flat and F.
That's right, D flat and F. And so that's all you would need to write for that one. And I think you have just a few problems in your assignment from Friday that are like that. You don't even have to write notes on the staff, you just list the pitch letter names, specific ones you need. Okay. Let me know if you have questions about how to do these right away. I'm just keeping an eye on the clock so that we can get through all this. Okay, the next one says notate the triad given the root and type. Well, we've been doing a lot of this already. I'm going to make some space here. I think one of the ones in the book gives you this, and it gives you this. And it's just telling you that that's the root of the triad, and I need you to spell me the type of triad above that root. So, E major. E is the bottom note that's given to us. Does anyone know what the next 2 pitches would be to complete or fill out that triad? G what? G sharp, good. And finally, the last note. We know it's got to be a B. Is it B flat, B natural, or B sharp, or something? This is plain B natural. Major third on the bottom, minor third on the top, G sharp to B. You'll also find out, since chords, triads, and all chords are stacked using thirds, you'll also find out that thinking about the pitch letter names, the intervals of thirds can be very helpful, like C, E, G, DFA, EGB, FAC, CBD, ACE, BDF. Now, that doesn't give you the precise accidentals you might need to spell the type of triad, but at least you know that any kind of triad that starts on an F, for instance, is going to be some sort of FAC. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so we did one of those. How about, this is interesting. This will make you think. Section C on the top of page 40, you'll have some exercises like this in your workbook assignment for Friday. Fill in the blanks. You see that the type of the chord is given on the bottom, and then the root, the third and the fifth are given. And you're only given like a little bit of information you have to complete or fill in the missing information. So for instance, number 1, we're told that we have an augmented triad, but A is the middle note of that augmented triad. How do we figure out what the root is? Can we think of, well, we know, what does the bottom interval have to be between the A and the lowest note? It has to be a major third, right? Do we know what note is a major third below A? Just plain F, that's right. It's not F sharp, it's not F flat. And then we need another major third above the A to make this triad augmented. What kind of third, or what note is a major third above A? C sharp. So you put that all together according to the right recipe, and there is an augmented triad. You're right, F, A, C sharp. I'm hoping that, thinking about intervals going down thirds below a certain note is not going to trip you up. For instance, like you see number 4. Number 4 gives you that the fifth of the chord is D sharp. Well, we know that the chord has to be some sort of GBD, but in order to make it an augmented triad, what note is a major third below a D sharp? And that's going to be a B. And what note is a major third below a B? That's going to be a G. So the final answer is G natural, B natural, D sharp. You should be able to, I think you should be able to do this. Just remember what types of intervals need to be, thirds need to be stacked in order to get the desired type of triad. Okay, and then last but not least, let's do one of these on the board, and then I think we'll be out of time. This comes from section D, and again, you'll have some examples like this or exercises like this in your homework for Friday. Okay, so we're in treble clef still, and let's say you're given the note as an E flat, and you're told that that is the fifth of a diminished triad. What we need to do is we need to supply the notes, the third and the root below it. A diminished triad, what type of third is stacked on top of itself? Minor third, okay. So if this is the fifth, if we can find a note, a minor third down, and then from that note, another minor third down, we should have our final answer. Who can tell me what note is exactly a minor third below E flat?
Just a C.
That's right, a plain C. And then what type of A flat, A sharp, or A natural is a minor third below a C? We need one more minor third down. A natural. So it turns out when you look at it from the bottom up, that A, C, and E flat, those three notes together make a diminished triad. And that's right. You play that on the piano, you'll get, that's what you get, that sound. Okay. So we're just about done here. Just as a reminder, your assignment for Friday is workbook pages 19 and 20. Please only do the ones assigned on the assignment sheet. You don't have to do them all. There's just select exercises I have you work on, okay? And that's pages 19 and 20. Oh, and by the way, I might not see some of you until October, so hand me a one. You're free to go.